All right, welcome to MATHY200. This is Chapter 5, and this is for Loyola New Orleans University. This is mostly going to be dealing with design and organization of web pages. So this is kind of a less tangible chapter. It's really just more a little abstract, I suppose, in concepts. The assignments aren't really as prominent in this chapter, but we'll get into it. All right, let's go. So you want to consider when you're designing your web page, and again, this is more of a technical class about how to make web pages, not so much a design class about how to make good web pages, and there is a significant difference, and we have to consider that. And the two are important. Me personally, I'm good at writing code in HTML and making things look the way they're supposed to be, but I'm not necessarily good at figuring out how they're supposed to look. I usually like to have somebody with a good design sense of design or experience with design show me or explain to me what they want, and then I can make it work. So they're kind of two sides of the same coin, or however you want to use analogy, but somebody who's usually good at the technical stuff is not always good at the design side, and vice versa. Now, if you could span the gap and live in both worlds, all the power to you. You will have a lot better career opportunities as you go. It definitely opens up possibilities, but usually everybody has at least some strength. Now, I could do basic design myself, but I'm not somebody who's really good at design, comes up with beautiful pieces of work. So anyway, your design is oftentimes dependent on the target audience. So in this case, we have a consumer price index website, a Bureau of Labor Statistics. So this gives us kind of something that's a little more generic and used by the general populace and not so fancy and really cool looking, whereas NASA's website should be pretty cool looking and should be kind of techno and space oriented and lots of dark colors and all this stuff. So your design can definitely be impacted by the target you're sending it to. When you're organizing your design, the structure of your website, all the pages together, there are kind of three ways of doing it, and generally speaking, we're the most useful to the hierarchical design, which I'll talk about. All three of these. Linear is kind of one that you can be familiar with pretty easily, and random is just weird. We don't see that very often. Chaos, I'd say random is strange. I don't like it. But we'll talk briefly about it. So the hierarchical is really structure you're used to, where you can, you go from one page, it goes to another page, you go to another page. There's a structure that is obvious intent in hierarchical. Really good for companies and corporations. You want to avoid making things too crazy as far as your hierarchy. So you want to avoid things either too shallow like this is, or too deep if it was going the up and down way. George Miller, if you ever take an HCI class, Human Computer Interaction, you'll talk about George Miller and his rule of 7 plus or minus 2. You don't have anything either 7 plus or minus 2 wide or deep when you're designing things, okay? It does limit you as far as the number of things you can display, typically up to about 50 items, but usually that's enough. If you're trying to display more than 50, hierarchical is probably not the right design for you. You might consider linear or even random. But if you have too wide of a structure, even at different levels, it gets confusing to the user. It really does. We just don't like it. We like 7, that number, plus or minus 2, 7, basically 5 to 9 items, okay? Otherwise, we just don't like it. And again, the same goes for vertically and horizontally. It really makes a big difference. There's a lot of research backing this up, and common sense and pragmatism. So just try and keep that in mind when you're designing your own pages. All the pages you're doing for the class assignments, the book assignments, all have basic 4 pages or whatever, and you're not anywhere close to that. But if you're designing pages for companies, just don't make this. I don't like seeing pages with a zillion different links on it. That's just crazy. Okay? There are ways to gain around that. But again, so this was the hierarchical too shallow, hierarchical too deep, find a balance. Okay, because you don't want to have to click here to get there. Again, 3-click rule is kind of a derivation of the 7 plus or minus 2 rule. You shouldn't take 3 clicks to get anywhere. It shouldn't take you, a whole bunch of time to navigate. They're just variations on the same concept. So 7 plus or minus 2 is really the general way of thinking of it. Better way of thinking of it. Linear organization. This is more like a slideshow, I suppose, than a web page, but websites can be designed that way. Tutorials or a tour are a pretty good way of doing it, but it's a very sequential thing, and usually you go one direction or maybe allow for both directions, but it's not as intuitive and as approachable as most websites would like to be, and that would be hierarchical. Random is really hard and confusing. Again, even chaotic pages and huge pages huge sites like Amazon or Microsoft or these large companies, even those generally have a somewhat hierarchical design, even a linear design to some extent. This chaos thing is not really kind of used anywhere, but it can be really artistic and cool and aesthetically interesting, I suppose. But yeah, I haven't never come across a good example of this. It's usually some combination of hierarchical and linear that makes it feel more random, but we avoid that concept. When you're designing, it's a good idea to have repetition and have repetition and have repetition. we like seeing the same things over again. Be consistent. That's what it comes down to. Use the same design throughout. That's where CSS is lovely. That's why we use CSS with the embedded, or not the embedded style, the external style. We really like external style with one CSS used for multiple pages across our site, so that the site looks consistent throughout. It's lovely, and you change it one place and it's done in all places, or fixed, updated in all places. So it's your friend. It looks good. It makes it so it is good design. Holds to good design principles. Make sure there's good contrast. Again, contrast can allow you to draw attention to certain pages. Like this page, your attention is actually drawn to this light area right here with the actual text that you want them to read. The contrast between the title here, Castilla Sedona, was just there. That is this background. This color is somewhat close to this background, and definitely blends in with this. And that you're kind of you see this, but your eyes aren't drawn to it. Your eyes are drawn to the main body of the page, and definitely not to the body over here and to this part of the page and this part of the page here. You're drawn to the center. You're drawn to where you want their target to be. These are difficult design principles to get through. Again, we have a good design department here at Loyola. Go and take some design classes. You'll learn a lot more than I could ever even come close to teaching you about this. But there are some basic concepts that you can get. Proximity is another way to enhance design. Put similar things together. Put things that you want. If your eye's drawn to one part of the page, put the stuff that you want to be drawn to in that part of the page. You can, alignment can also help with if it's left or right aligned. See, this is nice because this is left and this is thrown off to the right up here. So alignment can actually make a difference on the design and where your attention is drawn as well. And again, when it comes down to it, design is all about where, directing the user's attention, and that's, a pretty straightforward thing to do. When you're dealing with design, you also want to keep in mind accessibility. We talked about this a lot because it's a very important thing. You want the web is universal and accessed by everyone, regardless. So it's really important. And who cares about the disability? Or we should accommodate any disability or any thing that needs to be accommodating for accessibility as you can. And again, accessibility can be beneficial to people with physical disabilities, but also with, slow internet connection, or bad computer, lame computer, or even just a mobile phone. Less so these days because mobile phones are pretty fast and have good resolution typically, but it can make a difference for accessibility. So it's actually legally required for many pages. So it's not hard to get to that legal requirement, but it's good to go well beyond it. There are certain guidelines that you want to consider. Poor is a good way of going about this. Perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And again, good design will incorporate all of these and will have accessibility built into it, because you want to factor these in. I mean, if you have a web page or a website that has good design, by definition, it's going to have all four of these principles. It's going to be perceivable. The content's going to be available or be easily found. It's going to be operable, meaning that people can click on it and use it. It's going to be understandable, hopefully. I mean, that's part of your design. If your website doesn't make sense to anybody, it's a bad design. And robust is just kind of a catch-all for every other aspect of the design. So these are really the core principles of any design, whether it's for accessibility with respect to accessibility or not. When we are designing for the web, we want to keep it concise. When you're writing your text, don't get crazy elaborate. You're not writing papers for most web pages. You're writing some some details about something that's informative. It doesn't have to be extensive, generally speaking. And if it is, it's distracting, and you lose your reader, because people don't like to read long-winded, verbose comments. I get that. Bullet points are friendly. They're happy. They're the way the web works, so use them. They might be cliche, but cliche works because it's cliche. It works for a reason. It's there. It's self-logical, but it's self-referential, but it's okay to be cliche. Okay, headings and subheadings. Organize your text. Please keep it logical and obvious and easy and understandable and concise and direct. Short, concise. Concise is a good word for this. Use fonts that are common. We on the West Coast like Times New Roman type of fonts, and East Coast, you don't have to worry too much about that, but just select common fonts. Don't use cursive or comics or whatever, and all those weird ones. Also use appropriate text size. I like that, the way they use that. 1 EM is a good text size, or medium, or 100%. Those all three mean the same thing. 1 EM is nice because it's across the board. No matter what device, it will be the right size. And it's the best, strongest way of doing it. Good contrast, columns for what, we'll get to that. All right, we're going to pause here and then come right back to this.